Hello, everyone. I just want to confirm if you guys can hear me. Um, then we can start. If you could just give me a thumbs up so that I know you can hear me. All right, sounds great. So thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with PubGeek and myself. I'm Anirudh Agrawal. I'm an intern. I've actually just completed my internship at Nair Hospital in Mumbai. Um, so I just walk you through what we'll be learning today. So you might be wondering who I am and why I look like a young dude. Why am I trying to teach you stuff? Um, so, as I said, my name is Anirudh Agrawal. I have founded this platform called PubGeek to help young students, young medical students with research. I currently have around 22 articles published in peer-reviewed journals, in national and international. And I'm just trying to help students get these research opportunities, which unfortunately, due to COVID, have decreased because the need for volunteers has decreased because of this situation. But we hope to be back on our feet soon. Um, so pubgeek.co, I'm sure most of y'all have already been a part of previous conferences. If not, I'd just like to talk a little bit about it. Um, we are essentially a service that helps we're essentially a service that tries to connect doctors to medical students who really want to volunteer in research. And doctors in turn need student volunteers because they don't have the time to sift through the data or collect the data. So we try to bridge the gap between these two entities and try to provide research opportunities for the students. So that's basically what we do. If you haven't checked our website out yet, please go to pubgeek.co and you can see the previous research projects that we've worked on. We've already published two research articles, one through the University of British Columbia in Canada and another in the Indian Journal of Orthopedics last month. So let's move forward to what we all are here for today is looking for research articles, right? I don't know if you guys have already started maybe reading research papers or writing your own papers, but what we all struggle with is having looking for research articles isn't exactly like a Google search, right? Because you have to find very specific things and you have to include them according to whether or not they meet your criteria. So it might be difficult for a new user, like it's difficult sometimes for your parents to use Google as well, right? So it might be difficult for a new user to know how to look through them, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes quite easy. So why you need to do this, why do you need to look for research articles is to make a strong base so that you know exactly what research has been done up until that point based on your current topic, and what are the gaps that are present, and maybe you're trying to fill them through your research, right? So that's essentially what we're trying to do today is just looking for research articles through the multiple online platforms available. It isn't 1960s anymore where we have to go to the library, look for journals, and sift through them. We have a quick, efficient way to look through them through PubMed and Google Scholar and stuff. So we look through Google Scholar and PubMed both because those are the two most popular platforms. And I'll name a few others where you can um, look through them yourselves, or we may have another session where we can discuss them further, right? So we all wonder how it is that we actually do background research, right? So essentially what background research is we're trying to determine what has been done, what has not been done, and if our study is worth doing, if it's worth putting the man hours, putting the money, and the resources that we have into this particular topic that we're very interested in. So doing your background research essentially entails seeing what has been done up until that point in the form of research papers, research articles. And there are many types of those. There are case papers, original articles, meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and such. So it's important to have this background research before you actually step into, okay, I want to do this topic or I want to study this topic, right? It should not be done after you've determined what topic it is that you really want to research, right? It should be done before. So this is a small list of the online resources that are available. Feel free to take a screenshot of the same. Like I said, we'll be studying about Google Scholar and PubMed today, but there is Cochrane, there's Scopus. Cochrane is basically mostly for systematic reviews and meta-analysis, but it is a UK-based UK-based database that is available where you can search for specific articles that you're looking for. And there are many other Scopus, Cochrane, Ovid, Embase. The list is actually never ending because not all journals will be pushed into one particular indexation system. So let's talk a little bit about Google Scholar because it's easier to use. It's more popular amongst the young researchers. So the problem with Google Scholar is actually a problem of plenty, right? Because just like your Google results, have you ever seen the top bar of your Google search results? It says showing you results of 48 out of a million or something that they've come up with. So the problem with Google Scholar is how do you get down to the specific topics that you're looking at, and how do you determine whether that paper is useful to you or not? Because obviously as a medical student you have limited time and you cannot spend days on end just seeing what papers you have, then going through them, seeing if they're important or not. So that is the essential problem with Google Scholar that we are facing, and we'll figure out how to filter that down to the best possible extent, and try to determine what's useful for us or not, right? Oops, just give me 1 second, sorry. So I hope you guys can all see this now. Yeah. So Google, so like I said, there's a problem of plenty, right? So there are a lot of, so how Google Scholar basically works, right, is there are journals where people publish their papers, and Google Scholar indexes those journals, which means that the papers present in those journals will be part of their search results, right? Just how Google works, just how Google itself works. So the good about Google Scholar is that there will be many journals that won't be part of other filtered databases that will be part of Google Scholar, because Google has this habit of indexing any and everything that they find online, right? So you will find a ton of journals that you might not find even in PubMed or Scopus or stuff like that, right? So your search will be much broader. You'll end up finding more papers that you wouldn't otherwise if you limited it to just Cochrane or Scopus and stuff like that. So that's the good of Google Scholar. But the bad, again, like I mentioned, is that you're going to end up wasting your time filtering through this research, right? Um, so it's like going out to the beach on a Saturday night or a raging club. Everyone is going to be allowed on the beach, from the poorest to the richest. But the club has a very exclusive elite crowd that they want to filter, right? That's the same with PubMed and Google Scholar. Google Scholar is like the beach where everyone can go. Doesn't matter if you have 5 rupees in your pocket or 50 lakhs, right? But the club has a stag fee. They have a couple entry fee. So they're going to have those standards that you need to meet before you enter that club. So PubMed is like the club, but Google Scholar is like the beach, where a lot of journals and a lot of articles are going to be a part of their database, right? So Google Scholar, like Google, I'm sure you all have gone through it whenever you have been free and wanting to search for articles, and it's the user interface is pretty easy. All your articles are right there. It uses the same keywords as the Google platform does. So there's no technological know-how in getting a basic list of research articles um, in front of you, right? But um, there are a few basic things that you need to know to basically filter out, like I mentioned, the articles. So so the onus is on you as a researcher to determine whether an article is useful to include in your background research or not, right? Google's not going to tell you that, oh, you're doing this research, so let me suggest articles that match your research or something like that. So the onus is on you whether this article fits your background research methodology that you have gone away with. Uh, so before you begin your research, it's very important for you to define a few keywords by which you're going to search. For example, in a study, suppose I just want to do a study which involves stress and athletic performance, right? My keywords would be stress, athletic performance, student, college, sports, etc. Right? So before I have determined what exact topic I'm going to study, how I'm going to get my data and stuff, I want to do some background research. And this is the main idea of this research that I am playing with and I want to take part in. And so I've identified these few, maybe 5 to 6 keywords that need to be a part of my search criteria, so that I know so that I can limit myself to what I'm searching for, right? So if you have, like, I'm sure you've experienced this in Google as well. If you search just for one particular word, you're going to find many millions of results. But if you add a few keywords to it, you're going to filter down those results. Although they may still be around 2 to 300,000, but still you're filtering them down, and that's the aim with any sort of searching database, right? So, like I mentioned in the previous example, if I want to study about athletic performance, students, college sports, etc., right? So this is an actual search that I have done. So I have included a few of my keywords in an actual Google Scholar search. You can see that I have returned with 1 lakh, around 1,60,000 results. I don't know if that is clear to you, but it says about 1,60,000 results after having athletic performance, stress, and college included as my keywords, right? So I know it's going to be a Herculean task to sift through so many articles and determine whether they will be important to me in my background research. So if can you guys read this? Can you guys read the results? Is it clear, or should I somehow make it bigger? I think that's better. Okay, so if you can see the first 4 results: emotion and athletic performance, position of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, risk profile of male college athletes who use performance enhancing substances. Um, they're quite incoherent and not related to the same topic per se, right? So what can we do to refine our research even more, right? So I searched athletic performance, stress, and college, right? So now if I just include sports, right? Because this just had athletic performance, stress, college, I'm now including the word sports in it. So this has cut down on my search by more than 40,000 articles. If you can see, the results show about 110 versus 160, right? So this demonstrates the importance of establishing your keywords on your research before moving on to the collection of this background information and the background papers, which you will refer in your final article. This will prevent you from wasting a lot of time in this phase of research prep. And we will talk more about how you can further narrow down your research towards the end. For now, let's understand what information we are getting along with our search results, right? So this is a sample Google Scholar result. As you can see in the previous slide, we had shown you there were 3 results that we came up with. So this is a sample result that I have screenshotted and I'm showing you now. So what are the different things that this result essentially is trying to tell you, right? We all know that this is going to be the title. But this particular thing, the first few names that you see under the article are usually the author, right? So you can see it's J.F. Buckman, D.A. Yusko, H.R. White, and so on. That's essentially refers to the authors. This refers to the journal that it's been published in, right? So if you're looking at maybe an Asian population of college athletes, then you might want to exclude journals which are based in North America, or depending on your particular research, you can exclude them based on these basic things. This is the year of publishing. So just as a thumb rule, whenever there are reference articles available, we people prevent themselves from referencing anything that's more than 5 to 10 years old. Again, that's a thumb rule. If there are no articles available within the 5-10 years, of course you can reference articles published previously. But this is generally the rule of thumb that we follow. This is the number of citations. So this we'll talk about citations in a bit. So what this essentially citations are essentially the number of times that a particular article has been quoted or mentioned in other published articles. So how you write an article is basically whatever statement of fact that you are making when you are typing out your research article, you have to back that up with a published reference, right? So that published reference in turn is going to be another research paper, right? So when suppose I'm writing about stress in college athletes and I publish this paper, and I referred to this paper by say Mr. Shah, saying that in India college athletes do not undergo that amount of stress, right? And because I'm making that fact that it has been previously studied that college athletes and stress are not correlated, according to Shah et al. So I have to put that reference in. So that reference is essentially a citation. So that's what citation means. Now, why are citations important for you? More the citations of a study, the more is its reliability. Because essentially, the easiest way to determine the efficacy is right in the search results pane. You can be rest assured that if an article has been cited more than 50 times, enough researchers have poured through the data in the article and ensured that everything is up to code. Although you should definitely read any and all articles you are referring to in your papers, this is the quick way to shorten down that list that you might find of appropriate articles for yourself, right? This does not mean that if an article has not been cited at all, that its results are bogus. It just means that people may not have reached it yet, right? But you can be rest assured that if there are many citations, that article is pretty much reliable. However, you should still do your own background reading of that article and figure out whether the techniques that they have used or the analysis they have used is good enough or not. But this is a more or less foolproof way of determining whether it's reliable or not. So once we determine what exactly our search results are showing for us, we can move on to the other options that are available in Google Scholar. So whenever you search for an item in Google Scholar, you'll find this pane on the left, which has sort of the dates written, and you can customize your search accordingly. So like I mentioned, the rule of thumb about the 5 years old or 10 years old article, you can custom range your articles according to whatever period you are studying. So suppose your research paper is on how surgeons would perform surgery in the 1960s. It would be smart to limit your research to 1960 to 1969 so that you're not bogged down with other papers published after or before that. So you can filter them out for yourself, right? And there's an option of ticking to include citations or include patents, and you can exclude that if it doesn't involve your research. Yeah, so that's the pane, and you can sort by relevance or sort by date, determining on whether you want to get the articles which have been recently published. Like consider if you were talking about the SARS-CoV virus, you wouldn't want to talk about the MERS epidemic that happened earlier. You'd want to talk about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, right? So like I mentioned, these are the few things that are present in the results section of the article. So let me just zoom in this part for you guys. Right. So some other options that we didn't talk about were save results to library. So Google Scholar has this pretty neat feature of you being able to save any particular articles you find in your library. So instead of opening up, having 100 tabs open on your Safari or your Google Chrome, you can save this result to your library, and you can then see how many articles you have saved during your whole search process, and you can just go through them directly instead of having to search again or taking a screenshot or stuff like that, right? Cited by others is what I mentioned. So this particular article has been cited 109 times, indicating that it's pretty much reliable. However, I would still like to go through it and see that it's not, there are no obvious flaws in it before I cite it myself. And also, while you're writing your article, there are certain formats that you need to follow when you're actually writing your article, depending on what sort of journal you are trying to publish it in. So that's the cite article feature right next to the save results to library. We talk about that at a later date, where we're talking about how you actually can write the article. Today, let's focus more on how we can search for articles, right? And the last, the rightmost, this PDF semantic scholar. So if there is ever a link next to a Google Scholar result, it means that it's a direct link to the journal website, which is giving you access to the full text free of charge, right? Most often than not, it's free of charge. So you don't need to go to various websites that exist to actually get that article. So if you find that result right there, you can open that PDF up and save it. Yeah. So how you can access your, how you can access your save results to library, the articles that you've saved during your search process, is the My Library button right here on top of your Google Scholar results. So yeah, so I always use save result to library because it gives me an easy option to just make one-click saves on what I think just from reading the title, the date, and the number of times it's cited, whether or not this article will be useful to me while I'm doing my background research. So I think it's a neat feature, and you guys can use it as well. Another neat feature in Google Scholar is something called related articles. So if you find one article that is hitting the spot exactly, and that's exactly what you're really looking for, and you can just hit on this related articles button, and it'll give you. So Google has their own around thousands, or I don't exactly know because they don't divulge this information, but they have hundreds of thousands of keywords that they have for each. Article. So when you clicking on this button, they make sure that the articles that you are receiving are matching all those keywords to the one that you clicked, so that you're getting articles which are exactly similar to this. And it's basically an easier way of doing your background research. If you're in the preliminary steps, you don't even know what you want to research on, you maybe want to look at 4-5 articles and see whether this topic or subject is worth researching. So you can just click on that. So so this is an example of the first search that I did: athletic performance stress in college. And as I said, it has 160,000 results. But as soon as I click the related article button, it's cut down to 101 results, right? So that makes my life much easier. I know that 101 papers is enough to go through before I start my research. So it essentially helps me out on a lot of, it helps me out save a lot of time. So we're now qualified enough to move on to the advanced search bar in Google Scholar, which can be, if you just click these 3 lines and click on advanced search, you'll be met with this pane, which I'll just zoom in for you guys. Yeah. So essentially, you can find articles with all of the words, with the exact phrase, with at least one of the words, without the words. So this may sound a little complex, but I don't know if you guys remember from the 11th and 12th, we had those and or not gates in physics, which were quite confusing at the time. But this is essentially the same search criteria that they're using. So with all of the words means that the search result should contain each and every word that you mention in that text box. For example, if you search for college, doping, stress, athletes, all of these words will need to be contained in the article for it to show up as a result. Exact phrases is another option they have there, which can be used for terms such as doping agency or college athletes, where you have more than one word and you want the combination of the words to show up together. So if you want doping agency to show up together and not just doping dot 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 agency, just two separate words in the article, that's also a possibility. Um, with at least one of the words means that um, at least one of the words should be there. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So if I'm searching college doping stress athletes, all articles with college, all articles with doping, all articles with stress, all articles with athletes will show up. So if you're searching for something that is not very common, or is a rare entity or a rare pathology, you might want to use that at least one of the words so that you broaden your search criteria, because there might not be as many papers on that particular issue, right? And without the words means that it will exclude all results that contain the word that you put into the box. So if I'm searching for college doping stress athletes, but I don't want high school or I don't want university, right? So if I just put in university, any and all articles that contain the word university will be excluded from my search. So that also helps me cut down on articles that are really not important to me, right? Um, okay, one sec. Yeah. So then, yeah. So Google Alerts is also pretty cool for someone who's maybe in first, second year and are interested in particular issues or particular articles. So if there is any article which is um, like if there are any search results that you have done, and you can set up an alert for any new articles that turn up with that search result. For example, if I'm searching for although this is wide, say transverse myelitis, any new articles that Google indexes will show up in your alert, so that you can keep in touch with advances that are happening in that area, or any new articles that you might not get through a search, but you get an alert for it, so that um, you can keep up to date with anything that you are really interested in. Uh, so a few insider tips that I have gotten through my, which are available online, and that's how I got them. But so you can put quotation marks to help you bypass any advanced search option if you feel like the advanced search option um, is too complex and you don't want to go through that. You can just put quotation marks, where whatever is written between your quotation marks will be exactly searched for. So, for example, if you put college student in quotation marks, it'll become a phrase, and that's what it'll search for. It'll have to appear in all results for it to show up, right? And so, a little known fact is that word order is also important while searching in Google Scholar. Again, the same example, if your paper is on doping in college students in the USA, doping becomes the most important object of your search, because that's the first word that you have used in your search. So it'll show you more articles of doping in the start, and it'll leave all the rest towards the end of the search results. So that's also something that you can consider, making an order of the keywords that are important for your research. So again, my library is the star favorite thing that I showed you while you're searching for going through the Google Scholar results, so that you have one-stop shop for seeing any and all papers that you have starred, so that you can go through them in your own sweet time and determine what's right for you and what's not. So now, wow, you are an expert at Google Scholar, and you can perform your own searches and be able to appropriately filter out any results. Be sure to use it before your next research projects. However, you wouldn't be a true researcher if you did not know how to use the upcoming database, and that's why we're here. We're here to talk about PubMed. But if you guys have any questions about Google Scholar, I'm going to give you maybe 2 minutes to see if there are any questions that come up. Otherwise, we move on to PubMed. Yeah. All right, seeing no questions, let's move on to PubMed. It's the most organized, sought after, and scary database for amateur researchers. This is miles away from Google Scholar, both in terms of search parameters as well as the results you receive. The first benefit of PubMed is that it's limited to only medical sciences and its affiliates. There is no chance of running into articles from any other discipline. Unlike Google Scholar, which lists law papers, economics, finance, any and every subject that you can think of, it lists all those papers, therefore increasing your, although you have those keywords, still increasing the number of results you get. PubMed, as the name suggests, is for medicine and its allied branches. So you'll definitely get lesser results than Google Scholar. Another advantage of PubMed is that it's the most sought after database for journals. It has a very stringent protocol for accepting journals into its index. And therefore, the journals and by extension, the articles in PubMed are already pre-vetted by professionals. So you can rest your mind at ease for using any of these articles for your research requirements. So PubMed is a dynamic database where it includes and excludes journals based on their own requirements and parameters. So they tend to have the best articles and journals which are not paid for journals or stuff like that, where they have to meet certain criteria to be a part of that database. So you can rest assured that the data you're getting or the papers you're referring to have at least a standard base and standard reliability. So what exactly is PubMed? Before we start searching on it, I think a little bit of history is apt to know exactly what PubMed is. So the National Library of Medicine in the USA was started indexing all the biomedical literature that was available in 1879. So before that, it was just independent journals publishing stuff out. You would have to go to the library, get your journal and stuff. But at that time, no computers were available. They made a database of this literature in a physical form, which was called Index Medicus, right? So they actually had a list of all journals that would be indexed within this database that they were creating. So with the computer age, they decided to make an online database called Medline. And in 1996, they decided to give free access to this Medline database from an online search portal called PubMed. So you guys might be confused about Medline and PubMed. So Medline and PubMed are actually not the same entity, right? Medline is a database that is created by this National Library of Medicine, where it has articles within it. That's the database that they have created. PubMed is just a search tool for that database. However, there may be some journals that may be included in PubMed, but not in Medline, right? So they're two separate, not entirely separate, but essentially separate entities, where some journals that are present in PubMed may not be there in Medline, but all journals that are there in Medline will be there in PubMed, right? Because when you're trying to submit your articles for publication, you might be confused with, oh, it's Medline index, not Medline index, PubMed index, what exactly this is. So I'm clearing that doubt for all you guys. So this is the last figure that I have gotten from various internet sources, where PubMed actually has 30 million articles and 5,200 journals, right? So although, yes, it's lesser than Google Scholar, but it's still a lot to sift through to make sure that you know exactly what you're looking for, and it's easy to get lost. So those of you who may have used PubMed in the past, there is good news and bad news. The PubMed interface is being upgraded and was available since this Jan 2020. And the old interface, I think, is still available, but I believe that it's better to just go onto the new interface and see exactly what they have lined up for us and see what changes there are and what we can do to make ourselves the best searchers of PubMed, right? So if you guys ever land up on the old PubMed page, I don't think it's still active, but if you ever do, you can just click on that big banner on top to just go to the new PubMed, and you'll be met with this new interface. But before we start exactly searching in PubMed, we need to learn exactly what mesh vocabulary is. I know it sounds a little complex, but it basically stands for medical subject headings, right? It is the basis of how articles are indexed in the PubMed database, and therefore it becomes very important to understand the mesh system to perform a very focused search on PubMed. They are basically 10 to 15 keywords that are assigned to each article in the PubMed database by special indexers. So whenever uh, PubMed receives or Medline receives an article from a journal, right? They have their own keywords that they assign to that particular article and then publish it onto the PubMed search engine, so that when you use maybe one or two or three of those keywords, that article is going to pop up, right? So how they do it is using something called mesh vocabulary, where there's a limited set of words that they use for each article to divide it and use this limited set of words as keywords, right? So for us to be most efficient in searching through PubMed, it'll be better if we know what exactly mesh is, what are the specific words that they use, and how we can better refine our search, right? So Mesh has its own website. It's hosted on the same database. It's a National Library of Medicine database. So before we search in this database, even in the Mesh database, we need to understand what Mesh exactly is and how it's structured, right? So there are basically four types of Mesh words that they use. It's called headings, subheadings, publication types, and supplementary concept records. Publication types are the various types of articles, like original articles, case reports, review articles, systematic reviews, etc. That we don't need to get into right now unless you're performing a very targeted search. We'll discuss more on headings and subheadings, right? So if your heading is typhoid, your subheading could possibly be etiology and epidemiology. So your heading is the basic biomedical concept, and subheadings is further defining that concept. So consider you're talking about liver cirrhosis, right, which is basic biomedical concept. It could be talking about, there could be articles relating to treatment or etiology or diagnosis. So headings would be the biomedical concept, and subheadings are the various definitions to that particular heading, right? We'll talk more about it. I'm sure it'll become clear to you guys. So here you can see this is a list of all the 13 main branch headings of the mesh system. Each heading can be further divided into more specific headings. If you can just see the plus sign where you can, it divides into, it's all the words that define medicine, right? So it's going to be a long list. You don't need to learn the list. You just need to learn what they essentially are, and then you can start searching in the mesh database. So this is an example of a tree structure of the mesh system. So note that each word in this image is itself a heading, right? And the only difference between the higher branches and the lower branches is the specificity of the word. These are not subheadings, mind you. What we spoke about, the liver cirrhosis and the etiology is a subheading. But all these that you see in front of you, head, face, eye, eyebrows, eyelids, eyelashes, are all headings themselves. As you move downwards or you branch out, it's just that your headings are becoming more specific, right? So there are more specific terms for you to search with, more specific terms for your pathology for you to search with, right? But they all essentially can be used as headings themselves, right? So for example, if your study was based on the effect or based on the effect of on the eye of corticosteroid therapy, you can see that you can either use the more specific eyelashes, or you could just select the heading eye, which would be default, including eyebrows, eyelids, and eyelashes. So if I would just type the word eye, it would give me all the results of eyebrows, eyelids, and eyelashes. However, if I wanted to be more specific, considering pathology in the eyelashes, I could use that as a heading. I hope that's clear to you all. So let's move on to how we can search in this mesh database. So now that you've understood what a heading essentially is, you can search for terms specific to your research, which could be headings. So once you've established those 10 to 15 keywords that I told you about, you can now start searching in this mesh database to see whether PubMed people are indexing their articles according to the words that you have chosen. And if not, you can modify them. We'll talk about how to do that. So going back to the same example of athletes, steroids, doping, I put in the search of athletes, right? So the first thing you need to do is, because I'm describing a heading or a biomedical concept, I am going to go into this, I'm going to select this main heading descriptor, right? Because that's what I'm searching for right now. I'm not going to look at the other options that I have there. So I went and I had my keywords ready. I went and typed in athletes, and wow, great! Athlete is a mesh heading that they that which I can search for in PubMed with, right? So just to be sure that the mesh term is the same definition as what you mean, mesh has provided a scope note, which is essentially the definition of the term you have searched for. So if you see the scope note in this athletes section, in this athletes search result, you'll see individuals who have developed skills, physical stamina, and strength of participants in sports. So they have defined the word for you so that there is no confusion between what you're trying to search, what they mean by athletes, what you mean by athletes. I know athletes is difficult to get confused with, but there might be some other words that are colloquially used in the medical fraternity, but are not what are actually defined as, right? So great, athlete is um, a PubMed heading, sorry, a mesh heading, and therefore I can move on searching for my other headings, which were stress, doping, college, right? So now when I search for stress in the main heading terms, it said it has no results. So if you can just see the bottom, it says no results for stress and main heading terms, which means that stress is not a main mesh heading that they use um, while they are indexing the articles. So essentially, the word would they would just try to associate it in the PubMed result, but it wouldn't be something that the article is indexed with. So it would be little inefficient to use the word stress, right? So now stress is a keyword I had came up with, but it wasn't useful. So now what other words can I use instead of stress? So I went with anxiety, and voila, anxiety was a mesh heading that they used to index these articles. And again, you can see the scope note confirm that anxiety is exactly what they mean: feelings or emotions of dread, apprehension, etc. So yes, that is the anxiety that I'm referring to. Uh, and that is confirmed. So now my stress keyword that I had originally planned has been changed to anxiety. So that's how Mesh is essentially helping me to determine what words I should use while searching for PubMed, right? So now we have understood exactly what. Yes. So someone has a question. This done on Mesh side before going to search on PubMed. Yes, that's exactly right. So we know exactly what words to use while we're searching on PubMed, right? So now we understood what headings essentially are. Now we move on to subheadings, right? So for the purposes of subheadings, we'll be taking the example of gastroparesis, since it actually has a large amount of subheadings associated with it. So for the first years out there, gastroparesis is essentially paralysis of the stomach. That's not important. That's just GK. So these subheadings, as I mentioned, can be used in addition to the headings to narrow your topic even further. So gastroparesis, etiology, diagnosis, etc. We'll see that in the next slide. But once you have selected all your headings, you can view the subheadings that are used with that heading, right? So now consider I type gastroparesis and I get this search result in the main headings, right? Gastroparesis is my biological concept. It's my main heading. Now I want to see what the subheadings are. How can I further define gastroparesis? So there is a tab called qualifiers right next to details. If you can click that, you will get any and all allowable qualifiers associated with gastroparesis. So um, let me just zoom it in for you guys. So you can see it has blood, cerebrospinal fluid, metabolism, mortality, everything and anything that is associated with gastroparesis. You can define it adding on to that word, right? So I could use classification of gastroparesis. I could use complications of gastroparesis, drug therapy, etc., to filter out my results even further. Because whenever I'm doing a paper, I'm not going to be talking about gastroparesis as a concept, right? Maybe I'm going to be talking about a new therapy, or I'm going to be talking about a new way of diagnosis. So there are only going to be a specific set of papers that are going to be useful to me, right? And not all. So this gives me a clear guideline on what words I can use with gastroparesis to make sure that my search is most efficient and I'm getting all papers that I really need to, and I'm not getting any unnecessary papers which I have to sift through, right? So yeah, so that's essentially the crux of mesh headings and how you're going to be searching on PubMed, and it's essentially to filter out your results, right? So, but how is all of this useful to you? So, since all articles are indexed, as I mentioned, index in PubMed database using these words, knowing what words they use makes your search very specific, and it limits you to articles of interest that are important to you. Like I mentioned, there are more than 30 million articles in PubMed, and it's very important to limit your search, or you will go mad just trying to sift through the extra articles that are useless to you, right? So when searching in PubMed, it's best to use mesh terms. For example, instead of searching for bladder inflammation, which is not a mesh term, use your search for cystitis, which is a mesh term, right? Which would yield more accurate results and wholesome results. So I've actually performed that search for you. So if I searched PubMed for bladder inflammation, which is not a mesh term, I get around 16.5 thousand results, right? But if I just use cystitis, which is a mesh term, it cuts that down by about 15%, right? And although 16,500 to 14,000 may not seem like a lot, but let me remind you, this is just one search term, and just using mesh term has resulted in a 15% cut down of articles that would most likely be not useful to me, right? So everyone has understood mesh terms and headings and subheadings and what they are. If there are any questions before we move on to how to search on the PubMed. Dr. Himanshu has a question where if PubMed is a search tool for Medline, how come we cannot have journals as part of PubMed but not Medline? So all journals of Medline are indexed in PubMed, but the reverse is not true, where PubMed indexes some journals that are still not indexed in Medline because they have on some occasions they have different criteria that they have to meet for both. So, but all Medline journals will be indexed in PubMed, but the contrary is not true. All right, so let's move on to searching in PubMed. So this is the interface that you'll be met with when you go to the PubMed homepage. Um, so once you've understood what mesh is, what headings are, what subheadings you can use with that particular heading, you can now move on to actually searching in the PubMed database. And if you're just starting out your research and your scope is very broad, your aim is broad, you can just use this simple tool where you just put your heading, put a backslash, and you can use the subheading that's associated with that. So then PubMed knows that you're talking about gastroparesis as a mesh heading and diagnosis as a subheading. That's an easy way. If you don't want to be dealing with the advanced PubMed search engine, this is an easy way that you can use for a relatively broad search term, right? So I have an example here for you guys where I'm just searching. So in PubMed, I type gastroparesis and diagnosis. So if there is a space, PubMed uses the AND Boolean operator where articles associated with both show up. So the results that I got from just searching gastroparesis space diagnosis was 1,706. But when I use the backslash to let PubMed know that I know my mesh stuff and I want you to search through mesh, it gives me 543 results, right? So that has cut down my search results by more than 60%, right? So that's a great help to me, and that's why mesh is important to do before you move on to the PubMed search parameters, right? So mesh is essentially it's like PubMed. It's an online database that's easily available through the NLM website. I'll share the link with you guys on the group where you can practice on whatever it is you are interested in researching in. And if you have any questions, of course, I'll answer it on the group. So once you have this heading with you, right? So consider so sometimes our headings may not be specific. Like I mentioned, the tree branch structure that they have, eyelids, and etc. So sometimes the headings may not be the most specific. We may come up with a word, but the intelligent indexers in the NCBI may have come up with more focal words to define what we are trying to search. To determine whether our header is the most specific for our research, we need to head to mesh tree structures, which will again be available in the mesh search results, right? So consider I'm doing a study to determine the efficacy of blue light UV phototherapy on neonatal jaundice, right? I have decided that my header is going to be phototherapy because I've searched on the mesh tree structure, phototherapy is available. And I said, okay, phototherapy is my header. But I want to know if there are more specific headers which I can use to refine my search, right? So if I just click on the mesh tree structures, which is right next to qualifiers, I come up with this. So these are the specific phototherapies that these indexers at PubMed have come up with and are indexing their articles with the same. So phototherapy would give me results of color therapy, heliotherapy, intense pulse therapy, light therapy, etc. However, I am interested in, say, ultraviolet therapy or photochemotherapy, right? So in my neonatal, I'll be interested in ultraviolet therapy. So I'll use that as my new mesh heading instead of phototherapy, which would include all these um, tree branched structures as well, right? So just with the small check, I was able to omit results that would have come in my search bar. Had I searched for phototherapy, I would have gotten results from color therapy, photochemotherapy, intense pulse light therapy. But because I searched for this tree structure and saw what sub branches there are to phototherapy, I was able to identify ultraviolet therapy as a more specific heading, and therefore would use that in my search results instead. So phew, we have gotten through most of understanding what exactly entails PubMed searching, and we can now move on to and actually searching in PubMed using the advanced feature, how it actually works. So again, I'll give you guys 2 minutes to ask any questions on the live chat. Um, yeah, so do let me know. All right, no questions. Great, smart bunch. Uh, okay, so let's move on to how to search on PubMed. You need to be specific. The more terms you enter, the narrower your search will be. Sorry, just got a question. What if some articles are indexed both in Scholar and PubMed? How do we segregate our search for lit review then? So, what I usually do is I use something called EndNote, which is actually a whole course by itself. But it's essentially you can maybe Google EndNote. I download my results on the results that I've gotten onto EndNote through Google Scholar or PubMed. And if there are any duplications, it allows me to filter out those and remove any duplications that are present. So that's something that you can definitely search. Is it necessary to be a member to search articles on PubMed? No, PubMed is absolutely free. You can search whatever articles you want for. The articles itself might not be free, but searching on PubMed is absolutely free, right? So how to search on PubMed? You need punctuation. There should be no Boolean operators in your search itself. So that you don't need any punctuations, no quotation marks, for example, like we had in Google Scholar. You don't need to put and in between your words. Again, like Google Scholar, PubMed will add those and tags between those concepts, and you don't need to search for a specific like author Agrawal, journal IMJ. So PubMed already has it's some sort of AI where they recognize that you're talking about Agrawal as an author and IMJ as a journal. So you don't need to put these prefixes before that when you're searching on PubMed. Yeah, so this is an example of search results that you would get on PubMed. Let me just zoom it in. Yeah, so on the left, if you can see, you'd get the dates that as a graph, you get the number of publications that have been performed on those particular years and how it's essentially gone up or gone down, or when was the most common time that this particular topic was published. You'll see whether an abstract is available, whether free full text. So if someone doesn't have resources where they can access full text articles, it has an option of showing you, you just tick that and it'll give you only those articles which have a free full text available. So for some students who might not know this, a lot of journals have paywalls that we call them, where you may get the abstract for free, but to access the whole article, you might have to pay a handsome sum of maybe 20 to 30 pounds or dollars. So if you do not have the resources or don't have a funded project, you can use this free full text so that you at least get a basic idea of what exactly the current scenario of research on that particular topic is. Yeah, and you can definitely search through the article types, clinical trial, books, documents, and exactly depending on what exactly you're searching for. Again, like the publication date, as I mentioned, 5 years, maximum 10 years is usually a rule of thumb that we follow. That option 2 is available on the PubMed on the left pane. And there are additional filters that are available, which essentially include your article types, any ages or subject or sex or languages. So if you're just searching for English language articles, you might want to filter that out. Or if you're searching for only multi-center studies, journal articles, etc. So there is an advanced filters option available, which is quite self-explanatory. If you run into any issues with the same, feel free to WhatsApp me. I'd be happy to answer your questions. But I feel that that particular aspect of PubMed is quite self-explanatory, and I don't think it requires more of our time. You learn through it as you go. So now let's move on to the advanced search on PubMed, right? So you are now qualified to use this advanced method on PubMed, which is available right below the search bar. If you just click on advanced, you'll be met with a dialog box that, not a dialog box, maybe you open up a new page, which essentially looks like this, where there's a drop down of what exactly you're searching for, and you can enter a search term. And the query box on the bottom is essentially how you're building your search, right? So I'll show you an example of that. So that drop down box that you saw, which was circled right here, has all these terms associated with it, right? So what we spoke about was mesh and how that's the best way to essentially search on PubMed, right? So these four things are essentially these three, the mesh, major topic, mesh subheading, mesh terms are essentially what we are interested in today, where if you click mesh major topic and you insert your major topic or heading, as we call them, into the box, you can add it. So now you can add it into your query box, which is essentially how you're building out your search, like I mentioned. So once you add it, it'll give you an option of whether you want to add with and, add with or add with not, right? So let me just reiterate for those people who might have forgotten their 12th standard physics. So if you choose the add with and, you'll only find results which have both word A and word B, right? Or will give you results which have either word A or word B, and not will give you results which have word A but not word B. Okay. So for example, if I search for phototherapy and neonate, only articles with both these words will show up in my results bar, right? But if I search for phototherapy and neonate or baby, right? Phototherapy will show up, but neonate or baby, which means that phototherapy and neonate and phototherapy and baby will show up, right? But not will exclude results that have the word you have mentioned. If I search for phototherapy and neonate, not thalassemia. So if I'm doing a study, say on sickle cell and phototherapy effects on neonate, then if I put the Boolean operator not, it will exclude any studies that have the word thalassemia in them. So it's just an example of, consider I'm doing salmonella due to hamburger. So if there are 64,000 results of salmonella and 2,500 of hamburger, if I put the words salmonella and hamburger, it'll show me only results which are both of these words in the article, right? So it'll cut down my results to 12, right? This is not an actual search. This is just an example of how this works. Or you have or. So if you have football or hockey or soccer, it'll give you a list of all those articles that are present. So why this number is lesser than the addition of all three is because you might have articles which mention both, right? So that it essentially the most broadest terms in which you can search for is the Boolean operator or. And not is arthritis, not letter is, um, it'll have the word arthritis, but any articles which have the word letter associated with it will be removed from your search results. So, so the trick to make the best combination of all these is something called nesting, where we can have salmonella and hamburger or eggs, or salmonella and in brackets hamburger or eggs, right? So which basically means once you open the bracket, it's salmonella and hamburger or salmonella and eggs, right? It'll give you both those results. But the first one would give you salmonella and hamburger, and salmonella and hamburger or egg. So that's, I mean, it can get a little complex, but it's essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to nest these results so that we make sure that our results are exactly what we're trying to get. So what you can do, right? So I've put, as you can see in my query box, I have gastroparesis already included as a mesh major topic, right? And now consider I am studying about the causes of gastroparesis. So I'm adding etiology, right? And I add gastroparesis and etiology, right? But I don't want to talk about any epidemiology associated with it, right? So I will add gastroparesis and etiology, not epidemiology, right? And these brackets you can arrange based on exactly what you're searching for. Um, like I mentioned in the nesting, so salmonella and hamburger or eggs will give you salmonella and eggs, hamburger and salmonella, and eggs in general because it's after the or, right? So or, like I mentioned, is the most broadest search parameter that you can put. So if you have a particular word that you want all these articles associated with it, then you want to put it after or. So you finally found your paper, but now, oops, you have to pay to access. So what else? What are the alternatives that you can use, right? Because we in India, not many of our colleges provide us with online overhead access or other such platforms where they have a subscription to these separate libraries. So the first thing you can do is definitely ask your college librarian if she has access to the publisher, because I myself found out in the final year of my college that my college did actually have access to BMJ and others, where we just assume that our colleges don't have access. So the first thing, you can definitely do that. ResearchGate is a good platform. It's like the Facebook for researchers, where you can request authors for their research directly, and most authors do actually reply. You can maybe find their full text directly on that website. If not, you can definitely send them a message saying, hey, I'm so and so student, please, I'm working on this study, if you could please share your research paper with me. Most authors are very sweet, and they'll definitely send you an article back. So unpaywall.org is an extension for Chrome. It's completely legal, unlike some of the other resources out there, where it can give you access to certain paywalls, where certain articles which are blocked by paywalls. And you can also search for alternate research on open access websites. So open access websites are essentially those that are free for any readers to view, right? They do charge the authors while publishing, but they are free for any readers to view. So there are certain, but however, some of these open access websites are a pay for publish. So those are not ideal, reliable sources for your background research. But the first three resources are definitely something you can use to access these paid, to bypass these paywalls. There are also some illegal resources like LibGen and Sci-Hub. I do not endorse people using these, but they are still available. Yeah, so if anyone wants to take a screenshot of this, it's a QR code that essentially an article that was published that talks about all these alternate resources. So you can definitely refer to them. And yeah, so that essentially brings us to the end of what we were trying to talk about today. So if you guys would like, I'd take you through how we actually search on Mesh, and how we actually can get an article that we really want through PubMed. So just give me a second. I'll just start that screen share right now. Oops. Yeah. So this is the mesh database that we had. So the website is meshb.nlm.nih.gov, where we can search for all the mesh headings that we had described. So consider I am really into the spine, or so if I just type in spine, uh, I want to see whether it's an exact match. I put this in. So spine is an exact match, but spine is kind of broad. So I want to see if there are any specific subheadings below that. So we go to see, sorry, specific headings below that in the tree branching structure. So we go to mesh tree structures. We see, oh yeah, there is cervical vertebrae, intervertebral disc. So consider I want to talk about uh, if I'm talking about, say, an endoscopic spine surgery or something of the sort, then I want to talk about the intervertebral disc and not the coccyx or, sorry, not the coccyx or sacrum or anything that's not of interest to me, right? So I click on intervertebral disc, the page of intervertebral disc as a mesh heading pops up. If I want to further refine my research, I can talk about, I go to the mesh tree structures. It has annulus fibrosis or nucleus pulposus, but that I don't want to go that deep. I'm just going to go with intervertebral disc. And I want to see now what are the qualifiers that I could possibly use with intervertebral disc. So it has abnormalities, virology, transplantation, surgery, right? So I'm interested in intervertebral disc surgery. So I pop on to PubMed and I go to, sorry, this is blocking my, I go to advanced search. I look for, where is it? Mesh major topic. My mesh major topic was intervertebral disc. I add that. I go to mesh subheadings. I type out surgery. And I add that with and I want to make sure that these guys are in one bracket. And I can just search. So you can see I have 3,000 results, right? So because it is a very fairly common topic. But now I can further, if I don't have access to paid articles, I can just select free full text, and it gives me 500 results, which is lesser than 3,000, but it's still something that I can work with. Now, if I want the recent articles, I just shift this to 2010 to 2021. I have 300 results, and I can work with this, right? So again, in the PubMed articles, the information that they're essentially giving you is, this is the title of the article. These are the authors that are present, and this is the journal, the year that it was published, right? And a DOI. So some people usually have this question. So DOI doesn't refer to date of issue. It is digital object identifier. So if I just copy this exact DOI, open a new tab. Oops. So DOI is essentially an individual number letter or a set of number letters that are linked to a particular article, right? So that's essentially its unique ID. So if you have the DOI, you can directly go to that particular article's website. So yeah, and you can definitely see whether it's a review or a clinical trial or any particular original article that you're looking at, and that's part of your research. So what I usually do is, if I have a broad research, then I usually look at reviews, because they have. So if I just open this review up, I go on to this PMC free full text. So PMC is also where the National Library of Medicine houses most of its free full text articles. So if I just go here, it'll open up the whole article for me, where I can read through the whole thing. I can, and most importantly, I can also see any references that this article has. So I can determine, and I can open them up and see if any of them are important to me, right? In case I'm missing any references, or in case I want to access them, or the particular points being made by certain papers are really important to my study. So yeah, that's essentially PubMed. And you can again cite. So see, this is the format that I was talking about. There are different sort of formats depending on what journals you're looking to publish in. So AMA, APA, they're all different sort of formats where if you go to the journal and you see what exactly they have in the author instruction to authors, you will find what format they want. And this is essentially how you're supposed to cite it. So like when I mentioned citations, where consider this paper mentions that mean duration of rehabilitation. Yeah, so this might be mentioned. None of these studies reported that exercise increased the reoperation rate, which was what they found out through, because this is a review paper. It doesn't have its own analysis essentially, but it'll have a collaborated analysis of different other different papers. So this, I can cite this article in my study saying that exercise was not exercise was not related to reoperation rate. In the brackets, I can put this particular article and cite it according to this. So PubMed also has a favorites option, where you can add this to your favorites and you can view it. Oops, I have to log in. All right, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think it needs to be really explained further. You can also, yeah, you can email it to someone. You can email it to yourself if you want to. Sending the clipboard is something I find very useful when I am trying to collate all my research. So if I find this article particularly useful, I can send it to clipboard, and I go to the clipboard page. And if I have, say, 7 to 8 articles here, I can download them all at once in a format that's compatible with EndNote, and I can upload it to EndNote, and then I can filter out my research. So I find that quite useful to do. But yeah, that's essentially PubMed for you guys. If you guys have any questions, please do share them, and we can sort them out. All right. So someone wants me to demonstrate nesting, right? So okay, I'll just give you a quick example. So if you just go down, you can see the previous searches that you had done. So that's not an issue. I can just copy this, right? So see, consider this. I have put intervertebral disc and surgery in the same bracket, right? And the number of results I got, okay, let's remove this free full text. Number of results I got was 2957, right? Now I am doing the same thing while putting them in separate brackets. I still get the same results. However, if I have more than one heading, what was one of the subheadings that we could use? Say pathology. So I put pathology here. I add, where's it gone? Yeah. If I don't want it, not pathology, right? So I don't want pathology as part of my list. I get 2132 results. So this is talking about stuff that isn't related to the pathology, right? Because that's what not pathology means. and consider I add or, okay, let's go back to the search terms. I add or, let's see, microbiology. Right? Okay. So now I've gotten 1112409 results, right? Because if you guys could see in my search result, microbiology was outside the brackets. Everything was in their own separate brackets, right? See this? Everything was in their own separate brackets. Oh, God. So the or Boolean operator is essentially the most important when you're trying this nesting. So if I put intervertebral disc and surgery, not pathology, it's okay. Yeah. So if you're using any additional subheadings with your main heading, I would advise you to put it within these brackets. Oh, there is a mistake here. But anyways, I would advise you to put it the major topic and the minor topic within their own brackets, and then add the and or between them, right? So consider. Let me start again for the sake of completion. If I'm putting, say, intervertebral disc, right? Added that. Then I'm putting pathology, add with and, right? So this has become one bracket, correct? Then I am again putting intervertebral disc. And I don't want pathology. Sorry, I don't want, say, immunology. So I want to make sure that the second major topic that I put uh, and sorry, the major topic that I put and the second subheading that I put are in one bracket, so that there is no confusion there. Yeah, and pathology and intervertebral disc are in one. This is essentially what basically nesting is, where you've got to mix and match, and you've got to figure out um, what goes with what, and whether you want pathology, to consider you want a particular subheading associated with your main heading or not. So that's essentially what nesting is, and how you can use the advanced version of PubMed. So all right. So the worth of a journal is actually quite a complex. It's a complex question, But essentially, there's something called the impact factor that you can see, and you can see whether it's indexed or not. Usually, if a journal is indexed, so let me just show you an example since we're all here. There's something called Mago. It's essentially a journal country ranking. So if I search for Indian journal, or consider if I search for Science is this very well-known journal. So it gives you basically a bunch of information that you can use to determine whether it's useful or not. An H index is basically how cited or how well reputed that particular journal is. Um, and it gives you access to its homepage. Here you can find out the quartiles of essentially how good a journal is. So if you get a result on this particular web page, they are divided into 4 quartiles: Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, where Q4 is a journal that's not well cited, or essentially not well cited, but Q1 is a journal that's well cited, well read. So that's essentially the basics of how you can find out if a journal is good or not, where you can just search on this particular website. EndNote is actually a whole. So if EndNote is actually a whole this thing by itself, whole course by itself, because it can be kind of complex to use. But you can just log into EndNote online. You can create a free account, and we'll hopefully be doing another session on it soon, where this is essentially, I'm just trying to give you an overview of what EndNote exactly is, where you can just see the different sort of, you can add your particular papers to this platform, where you can collect and you can do an online search. So you can choose the NLM library, and you can search using all these separate fields. So yeah, that's how, and then you collect your references, where you can make your groups, and you can just have a database of what you want, and then you can reference them easily through your Word document. So a lot of you may not know this, but when you're making an article, you don't need to copy paste the citation, because that makes it very difficult to edit it later if you have to add another reference above or before other references. So you can use something like Mendeley or EndNote. I personally prefer EndNote because that's what I started with. But you can use other softwares that are out there to make your life easier. We'll have a session on it soon, hopefully next Sunday. But yeah, this is the basics of PubMed, EndNote, and yeah, sure, I'll send you the screenshot on the group. There's no issue. So yeah, any other questions, or we can end for the day? Yeah, so if journals are sending you emails regarding, please, we have 4 articles short of publishing our our December issue or something, then most likely they're predatory, because they usually seek out medical students and stuff who do not understand essentially what a journal needs to be. So yes, if there's Samne say that if anyone is emailing you, then know that they're most likely predatory. And it's not advisable to submit to such journals, because the medical community has a consensus on, they figure out just from the title whether it's a predatory journal or not. So I wouldn't recommend to submitting to such journals. Better to not publish your paper than have it published there. All right, so I don't see any further questions. Thank you so much, you guys. You've been a lovely audience. Um, I hope to keep in touch with you through our PubGeek groups. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, where even if you haven't registered on our future conferences, you may get a notification of any other stuff that we're planning to do. And although we are a research volunteer platform, research opportunities have been low the past few months, as you can imagine. But we are working on moving forward and giving more medical students opportunities to work in research. So I do hope you stick with us. And if you have any other questions, feel free to WhatsApp me. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.